And so I've been, I guess, doing electroacoustics off and on since '91, so at SFU. So that's where I got my start. So yeah, if you want to download the talk, it's really short because it's only 15 minutes long. This is the site. So I'm starting up a school of game audio. So if you're interested in learning about interactive audio techniques, which are related to game audio, then have a look. There's my email, and then also if you want, you can follow my Twitter feed, which has updates and stuff on it. So like I said, I got my start at Simon Fraser with Arnie, Martin, and also Barry. So this is the good memories here at the SFU Theater, where I would come in, basically sort of turn down that hallway, then go down the steps, day in, day out, and so then I'd sort of, get to about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then go back to the residence, and then come back and do the same thing all over again. This is the view from the AQ, the typical sort of view. So these are sort of my early memories of when I got started with electroacoustics, and then in the lab we had the little putney there, which was kind of fun to play around with. You have to be very gentle with it because it has the 2 boards and the little matrix panel there, so you have to make sure not to bust anything. But there was some really good sounds I was able to get out of there. So yeah, the things that I learned at SFU, I guess about 20 years ago now, and counting, is granular synthesis, FM, and Max MSP, which had just gotten started at that point, and then I've sort of switched over to pure data these days. So most of the work that I do, I try and work using open source technology, so that when I do presentations, that people are able to take stuff home and play around with it and not have to pay for software. They don't necessarily have it. So yeah, as far as electroacoustics, it's not related to game stuff, but I worked on the corporation, so I was the principal composer for that. And to underscore the well, there's a lot of dialogue in that. So a lot of interviews, and there's sort of B-roll stuff, but primarily it's like interview stuff. And so it's a great way to sort of sneak in this sort of layer of just sort of to make you think, but not necessarily to push you in one direction. So using granulation is great because you take a sound, you cut it all up, and it's really, the way that I see it visually, it's kind of like looking at water. It's like constantly changing, but at the same time, you know that it's not going to do weird things like spontaneously go up or something like that. You know sort of what the contour and the texture of it is, but at any given moment, it's got a certain aleatoric or sort of stochastic, sort of random kind of feel to it, which I thought worked really well with the picture. And yeah, it was to create this sort of ambience of a sort of dis-ease, so that hopefully you just sort of think about this stuff, and I think it's quite important. And it's kind of interesting that this stuff has come sort of full circle with sort of the Occupy movement. And this is just saying that the film did really well. If you want, you can download the album for free off archive.org. Put it up there with the Creative Commons license, which I also think is kind of an important thing to do, is to share. So you can have a look at it and listen to it there. And really the program that I used for about 99% of the soundtrack was Audio Mulch. So I don't know if you've used that. It's by Ross Benzina. He's this Australian guy. I talked to him and met him. And so the interesting thing that I found about software is that it's a tool, and it's like similar to working with toys. It's a very interesting thing when you work with a tool that it works in sort of like it makes you do things in a certain way. And if that's naturally the way that you're going to do them, then that's great. So you don't really want to be fighting your tool. You want to just be like communing with with your music. Just kind of go like, there you go. I'm able to actualize it and get it out. So I found that for me, Audio Mulch was a great way of doing that, because I really like this sort of patch-based approach with Max and PD. But the problem is that I found that it was kind of like, it's the difference of like soldering your own components versus like using a pre-existing kind of like, sort of like mixing board or something. I like to sort of work with a little bit sort of, more chunky layer of granularity as far as the objects that I work with. So in this case, I've got a little granulizer here. I've got, you can synchronize VST plugins along the timeline. So I used FL Studio, and then I still use FL Studio, really to do sort of note-based stuff. Here it's generating like harmonics, and it's going through all sorts of processing. Here, of course, my favorite, distortion, right? So I still remember when I started out in 147 and continued through that. I remember a good buddy of mine who's actually the godfather of one of my sons, Lars Korb. He was making this. I know. He's still in Germany. In fact, he designed the background. I'm still in contact with him. But he was working on this really, I guess you could say, sort of somewhat annoying sound, like noisy noise, like glitchy noise. And this was way back, like in '92 or so. And yeah, I showed it to Barry, and Barry was very not impressed. And not to say that, you know, it's a shortcoming. It's just like you have your own aesthetic. And it's very interesting. Sometimes it's just not the right time or not the right setting. So yeah, if you find the right setting of a performance space and having people interact with it can be really good. And yeah, we had lots of good times. I really enjoyed the time that I had, you know, working with Electroacoustics back in the day. And so I've continued really to pursue that as I continue to work in my own practice. And yeah, these days I teach, I do lectures, and I basically I do that plus compose. I don't work full-time these days, which is kind of nice. I'm kind of lucky that way. But this is sort of my full-time-ish gig right now, is this game called Vessel. So what I'll do is I'll show you, and I guess hopefully we'll have some audio. Hopefully the audio's not too loud, but I'll just pause it there. So yeah, just to throw that out. Any questions about that? The piece of music is John Hopkins. Does anybody know who he is?
Yep.
Yeah, he's been recently working with Brian Eno, so hopefully we know who Brian Eno is. And the vocalist, as far as I know, is Imogen Heap. So that's who we're working with this game, which is pretty cool. So we've got 10 songs from him, hopefully. I've got the stems, I just don't have the contract yet. And I've been working on that since May, so that's where the music comes from. And then I did all the sound design. And it's a physics-based, kind of liquid, hopefully you can see like a puzzle game. And so all the puzzles, they're all physics-based puzzles. And the idea with those little guys, they're called fluoros, little water creatures, is you kind of entice them to move different places to, you know, do various levers and buttons and stuff like that. And the story behind it is that it's sort of this sort of like a steampunkish kind of like, you know, like sort of turn of like fantasy, like, you know, start of the 1900s, kind of, where instead of going the way of electricity, this world sort of went the way of sort of pneumatic, kind of steam-driven, water-driven stuff, and like these fluoros are like a nanotechnology to do with water. So it's kind of like robots but made out of water. So all the sound design is all sort of generative. So every single sound, even the footfalls and stuff, they're commonly 3 different sounds. I use a lot of granulation to create, say, like there's the those bellows off the machinery and thing. What I did for that is that I recorded like the squeaking of like my leather jacket, and then I, cut that into little granules, not necessarily like grains as far as 50 millisecond grains, but short chunks, like maybe 1/10 of a second long or so, or maybe a little bit longer than that. And then so those get sort of randomized, sort of for the leathery squeaks, and then the air, that's actually just filtered noise. So what I've been doing is using a program called FMOD, and I just presented in San Francisco actually this last weekend on sort of my sound design for that. So all the sounds are meant to be, they're meant to sort of come alive. So every time you step on a button, it's slightly different than the last time you did it, but at the same time, it's not totally random. Like, you should still have that satisfying clunk when things happen. Questions, I think. But sort of, this is sort of what I've been doing as far as video game stuff, and I'm quite happy to have arrived at a game like this that gives me this kind of flexibility.
What platform is this designed for?
Well, I develop on the PC, and so that's why I can't play the game, because I'm in Mac mode right now. And then it'll be on the PlayStation 3 and the 360.
Right.
But they're pretty much, they're very similar systems.
Right.
So the only thing that's really going to be different is the compression, sort of. So on the 360, we've got their version of MP3. On the PlayStation 3, we're allowed to use MP3 because they've done a licensing scheme with Sony. And then on the PC, we're actually using a different compression called Kelt, sort of related to Vorbis, like on Vorbis.
And do you have a proprietary system for generating the sound?
I use
working within the existing PlayStation, etc.
Yeah, it's a good question, because there's all sorts of what's called middleware, basically sort of software that allows you to do the implementation. And common middleware solutions are Wise. It's actually a Canadian company, Audio Kinetic in Montreal. And then FMOD, that's done by Firelight, and they're Australian. We happen to be using FMOD. And so with that, it allows me to do certain things quite easily, but I'm really struggling with the music side of things right now. So it's going to work, but it's been a real challenge, because the thing that that I'm trying to do with this is it seems quite simple, but what I've been doing is breaking things into to layers. So I've got different when things sort of unfold, then the music unfolds as well. So we get stems, which are sort of 20 or 30 channel mixes from John Hopkins' record label. And then from there I downmix those or submix those into 4 sort of stemmed out versions, being ambient, harmony, bass, and drums. And so as you figure out these puzzles, it sort of unfolds the music as well. And they don't necessarily just add on to each other. I can actually have a little system where they add and subtract, and if a layer plays for too long, then it'll stop playing. And so we're using FMOD, and then I have a layer on top of that, which is similar to allow sort of interactivity like that you could do in Max MSP. That's called Lua. So it's all scripted stuff. So that's where I get to do sort of the tricky stuff, like the state-based stuff, where you have to remember what kind of things happened before. Yeah.
So is it possible within FMOD itself to do then an emulation of this sort of interactive, just to say you're going to write a track for a game, and you do the background thing, and then you do the layer over the top of it, which is going to be the more action-based, and the more action-based thing, and then you do the crossing back and forth, which is essentially what I think you're referring to here. Is it possible to mock that up entirely within FMOD, or are you just mocking up a simulation within that, which is then later on used as a basis for the actual programming of the game engine?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I wondered if that might be the issue.
Yeah. Nice question.
Thank you.
So, yeah, The question being is kind of, in a sense, how do I put the music in? I know. What happens is that they have a custom 3D editor that's called Splinter for whatever reason. And what I do is I place, or actually the audio coder is doing it at this point, and he puts in triggers that are based on location, but they're also event based. So if one of those little fluoro guys lands on a button, then I can actually go like, bink, oh, I want to play the harmony and fade that in over a certain period of time.
Right.
So that's how the music gets placed. Within Fmod, as far as simulating that, like you can, it's easy enough, like even within FL Studio, to sort of mute the layers, and I do spend a lot of time figuring out what kind of mixes work well. Like when you're, it's like, when you set up for a live gig, if you're going to do sort of that kind of a performance where it's like a mute mix kind of idea. Yeah, where you're figuring out what works well when you subtract layers. I'm able to do that there, and then in Fmod, I can trigger it. But the problem is really it comes down to like pacing. It's because really what I'm doing with interactive music is I'm figuring out how to make a system that is really like somebody underscoring it in real time.
Yeah.
And to have a sense of intelligence behind it is tricky.
Question then.
Yeah.
There's a thing I read about some time ago called a drama manager.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if a drama manager might be one method to implement sort of an overriding formal logic.
Yes. I just so much drama. Different video games use different methods. I know that for Dead Space they used that kind of an idea, and they scripted a lot of stuff in Lua. At the end of the day, it's what you really want is you want to be able to play the game and have yourself play the game that's sort of an expert at that point, plus somebody that's new playing the game to be able to play it, plus somebody that's, maybe a game tester that's actually really good at playing games and can fire through the levels no problem, and still have it so that the music still works. Because, if you have somebody run through something and you hadn't thought that they were going to do it so fast, you might not even get past like the intro of the piece, and then the song's already over. So a lot of it is actually play testing. So as far as the drama manager, I would say that we've constructed our own kind of thing with sort of triggers and with sort of scripting within Lua to do that. So that's how we've sort of put it together. So there isn't a lot of necessarily like
that's being driven though by the player as opposed to the drama manager as that individual.
And I mean, and to me, like games, they're typically player-centric. So if you're sitting in one spot for a while, we even have conditions for that, where the music kind of falls back to sort of this ambient kind of bed, and then eventually it'll just go to the sound design. And that's another thing too that I'm sort of struggling against with the guys that made it, is that it's the same thing as working within film, where they had a temp score for years. Like they've been working on this for a couple of years. And now that we finally got the stems in the last couple of months, I'm trying to change things. And they're like, oh, it doesn't sound the same. So no, it's not supposed to sound the same. It's supposed to sound better. So, and sometimes there's a little bit of dust when you're working on things. So I'm struggling against that with to make it so that it sounds the same, yet different, yet better, yet, so that it's kind of like you have to leave them on a little bit just so that you don't freak people out. Because what I did is that they had a loop that was like 50 seconds long that was playing for a long time in there, and I tried to make it so that it plays the whole track, but there's a lot of contour in the track, and they were like, well, it sort of sounds like it falls flat. So now I'm trying to rebuild up the track. Like you can see, this is the exploration music, and I just used John's music there verbatim. But in this, I had to cut up stuff, and I had to like move drum tracks around so that it basically keeps a certain level of consistency to the overall intensity level, so that it doesn't modulate too much, unless you're actually adding and subtracting elements, interactively. Yeah.
Oh, do you use I'm not sure if it's in the engine or not, any tempo. I don't know if it works or not, but something like in time stretching features within the music at all that allow for pacing within tempo. Does that ever come into play? I'm looking at how Ableton Live has, you can time stretch things if that ever comes into play.
If it was my own music, then maybe, but working with John's music, I would be loath to do that, because Yeah, you have to. I mean, that's kind of in the contract too, is that we're trying to keep within his spirit of the way that he intended the piece to be. So if it feels like things are, getting really, changing too much, then I think that would cause problems. But that would be great. I mean, you can totally do that with granulation these days. It's no problem. Well, I shouldn't say no problem, but it's getting there. And actually, the latest release of Wise allows you to do time stretching, which is great. So finally, it's sort of available in sort of mass quantity.
In this particular case, how much is John's music? What are the constituent parts, or how many constituent parts are there? Like layers, in other words.
Yeah. Well, when he delivers it to us, there's 20 or 30 different that he's already compressed down to his sort of version.
Right. So basically, but when you trigger certain like elements or layers of it for the dramatic recreation of this, or emulation, or the incidental kind of creation of this, then you will be starting certain layers and other as per that right hand side, the blue is all the
the blue corresponds to the ambient layer, so that's sort of the bed layer. Maybe what I'll do is I'll play a couple pieces and then it'll make more sense.
Now, are those layers part of his music?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're not elements that are separate from the overall finished track.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, because I'm trying to just use his material.
Got it.
So I'm trying not to add new pieces of my own
And
stuff.
it's being extracted as per what he gave you, separate in layers like the. Or did you extract them yourself?
I'm doing it myself from his work, but he gives us the stuff that he feels comfortable with, giving us control over. Because there's certain parts that I noticed, like where he'll have a strings, but he'll also have like the kick drum in there. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
You're not taking those apart.
No, you can't touch that.
Quick question on that too.
Yeah.
With what he's using, say he's using Omnisphere or some sample package or something along those lines, how do you have to, if you have to deal with those concerns too in the instrumentation?
Oh, like the licensing issues?
Yeah, those sorts of things too, yeah.
No,
Okay.
no, because they deliver it to us, and if we get screwed over, then we just hand it over to them.
Okay. Yeah.
The contract that we sign it's very standard.
Yeah.
That's the responsibility.
That's pretty common in film music too. You basically, this is all licensed.
Yeah, license. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is one.
And it's also like the American Army don't ask them to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the yes, I can play a little bit here. I won't play the whole thing, but because there's a lot of music. But what I'll do is I'll show you the sort of the ambient bed that would be playing. So this is like the ambient bed that would be sort of, if it's just one thing playing, this is as minimal as I could make it within sort of the director for the game. Because I tried stripping it down a bit more, and he wasn't very happy. He was like, well, it doesn't sound like music anymore. There's right?
Keep it
Just
lively at all times.
Exactly, just a little push, right?
And yeah, you can start any other object inside this.
Exactly, yeah. So then, there's like the base layer, and I can't layer them, but hopefully, we're all audio folks here. So this could play on top, So
Yeah, sure.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, same tempo, same.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a drum there, right? And then when it all comes together, then this is, there's a little.
You obviously have some kind of, I don't know in gaming at all, but you have some sort of syncing mechanism that will make sure that you're rocking
Yes.
it.
Yeah, it's
So
sampled.
we say.
Exactly, it's sampled. So all these tracks they just start at the same time, and then they go from there. And he's also a.
Oh, I see. So they're looped, and then you just bring them in.
Exactly. It's like a mute mix. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And what you're talking about, we will have like stingers and overlays. you would have to be very careful not to hit any triggers, because the triggers change the music too, right? Because this here is the one piece of music, where this is the action stuff that I picked out of the latter part of this piece of music. And then if you're sort of just exploring, then you get this section, which is a different section of music, okay, which is quite different.
And it, obviously you have some kind of transition.
Exactly, yeah. These two, they're meant to sort of crossfade between each other.
Alright,
Yeah,
alright, yeah.
yeah. So it's as far as because with working with electroacoustics, and I have a programming background as well, is that you can try and make things really complicated, but with this, the idea is to make the music is really good on its own. So if we wanted to, we could just have needle drop, and it would probably work okay. It would drive me nuts to have the full mix on, because you can play this because it's a puzzle-based game. If you get stuck on a puzzle, things are like, you know, you hear that music. And the way that oh
you're
man,
gonna want
totally. I know.
So,
And I'm trying to make the sound design really rich too, so that when you redo things, it's not really maddening.
Yeah.
So there is a simplicity to it, but at the same time, hopefully what will happen is that the way that we sort of do the spotting, when the triggers happen, is that it will be, it'll just have that feeling like it pushes you, rather than feeling like it's pushing against you. So it's, it'll take a lot of tuning to get to that point, but yeah, that's what we're hopefully getting to. So yes, it is a very simple method. And the funny thing is that I've done this work for Electronic Arts as well, and we had sort of a trickier system there. It's funny. I just wanted to rest for a while. The system that we had there was a proprietary system called Pathfinder, and with that, it allowed me to do a lot more things. And this was for NBA Jam. So I could have presented on that, but the music itself was a lot, you know, it's more like urban kind of like stuff. And I had a bigger hand in mixing that material too. Whereas this, I'm trying to be hands off and spend more of my time just, it's almost like I'm performing, you know, like it's almost like a diffusion performance in a sense, you know, where you're really figuring out how to, match the music and the experience, you know, while it's happening. Yeah.
is that more difficult or easier?
It's tricky because, yeah, when you know how to do the programming, and you know how to do the music, and you know how to, like, you know, do the interactive, then you have this thing of like, you can stick your finger into this and
You
like,
can solve the problem in 3 different ways.
yeah, and a lot of the times, I'm just, now the more I spend with this material and this kind of, you know, working with games, the more that I find that I'm trying to really have, like, you know, the music, like the composition itself is king. And it is real, I'm finding it's a real challenge to get the composition of a generative, or like a really, like, where you're generating synthetic material, say, for on the fly, to have that sort of as a live thing that sustains itself well with sort of, you know, like gameplay. That would be really difficult. These days I'm trying to really respect sort of the form of, and the contours of the compositions that I'm working with. So yeah, it's tricky, but I find that, yeah, simplicity, I think, sometimes does work, because there is a lot of complexity in his music. I would recommend having a listen to it. It's really, I'm having a great time going through his tracks, because he's just, I don't know, I can't say enough good things. It's very inspiring. John Hopkins, yeah.
Actually, Coldplay used his music too.
That's true, yeah.
What's his background?
Yeah, well, basically he's like a really, he's a classically trained pianist, and as far as sort of, you know, like almost like a, you know, I guess he won a lot of competitions as a kid, and then he like bought his own gear, and then he eventually got around to fooling around with stuff. And now when he does performances, there's a, you know, he uses a lot of Chaos Pad and things like that.
Oh,
So
okay.
he really does try and get in and reproduce his tracks live when he does electronic performances. So he's doing like way more than I am, you know, like with his tracks. So yeah, it's inspiring to see that he's adopting that approach, and at the same time he's quite popular. And we still are having a hard time licensing him, because he's become, they contacted him like 2 years ago, and he's gone like this since then. So yeah.
Getting harder.
Yeah, it's, yeah, like I said, I'm dealing with 3 different places. I'm dealing with LA, like his production company, which is Cobalt. And then there's some of his tracks are on Domino Records in New York City, and then his main label is Just Music in London. So trying to synchronize these three it's tricky, but it's well worth it. I'm really looking forward to when this comes together, as far as, you know, when I'm happy with the music and the sound design. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to show. It's just sort of a little path on sort of how I got to what I'm working on right now. And yeah, feel free to just contact me by email, or you know, I'll be around for maybe 5 minutes, but I at the same time I gotta work on this too. So yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, John.
My pleasure, thank you.